I'm Danica Purk, and I'm president of an international association for management development in dynamic societies. And from here it came the idea to the organizers of this forum to make this, event, this roundtable, this panel today with this topic. It started like that CEEMAN, the association that I preside from its beginning, it's 25 years old, and it is, it's called CEEMAN, CEE, Center, which stands for Central and East European Management Development Association. And we were founding this association 25 years ago, 13 business schools, one or two of them were Russian business schools, and certainly one of them coming from here, the IBS today. Later, we saw that we have a lot of common things with other emerging economies, and we got interest from them to come to join us. And so we kept the name CEEMAN, but we are saying under CEEMAN, the International Association for Management Development in Dynamic Societies. We did not want to say emerging economies. Some people said, why don't you say rising economies? But we know exactly, you know too, that sometimes they are rising and sometimes they are falling and again rising, etc. So we said they are dynamic societies and not only not economies but societies. So that from there the idea. And we would talk today about this phenomena a little bit. What are they, the business models similar? What can we learn from each other? And so on. But before I continue with my short introduction, I would like to say that I really apologize for being late because every morning I left the hotel at 9 and I was at 9:30 here. But today I was also here on time, not 9:30, but like 5 minutes before 10. But then they were sending us from IBS a car which was not registered. So we could not enter with the car this area, and then the driver drove around. We wanted to go by foot. We were 3 people. We wanted to go by foot, but which was the most intelligent. But they were driving us then back again. Then another car took us, on this side of the of the door, etc. So that is the reason, and I'm guilty that I didn't go 2 hours earlier, but I'm not guilty for this last problem. So I'm really very sorry, and it's really bad luck. So, but here we have with us today not so terribly many people, because I believe that panel is good if there are some people, and giving some introduction, short one, and then we have a discussion. Till now, I participated in 2 panels, but we hardly had any discussion with the public. So I hope that today this will happen, and I would be very grateful if you could participate and, not only asking questions, but really contribute whatever you can and wish. And we have a translation available, so this will be fine. We have with us Valeria. Valeria, what is your Pavlikovskaya? Yes, I see here.
Yeah, that's a bit of a difficult one.
She came just this morning to announce her presence, but of course we are very much welcoming you, because IMD Lausanne is for sure one of the best management schools in the world, and to have such a representative here is very fine. The other day we had the president of that school here, and so Jean-François Manzoni, and I think we can learn a lot from him, and I always do. Then we have here with us, but we don't have the guy, Jean-François Fiorina, who is written here. He is the Vice Dean from Grenoble. He left this morning. He told me yesterday he cannot come. But then we have here Veselin Blagoev, professor of marketing. He is also teaching in this school here in the IBS, and he is a vice rector of Varna University of Management, Bulgaria. He is also one of the pioneers in management education in Eastern Central Europe, and he was for many years a board member of CEEMAN and a very active person who did a lot. He was also a minister in Bulgaria years before. You know, there were quite some people in politics, and then they went and create management schools and education, because management education is really a great opportunity to make impact on society to improve. I hope that everybody who is in management education, here we see quite some students, realize that you will have a great chance to do something for bad or for worse. And we hope that you will do for better or for worse. And I hope that you will do it for better, for sure. And then we have here with us Konstantin Shamble, General Director, Center for Strategic Intercultural Communication. And since I remember his face from last year, but nothing more, perhaps, Konstantin, you could say 2 words about yourself, please, now.
Well, a very short introduction. I'm half Russian, half German. Was born in Asia and a psychological background in Munich University. And since 2010, I do a lot of intercultural business communication trainings for big corporations like Volkswagen, Siemens, Fraunhofer. And the idea why I'm here, well, in less than few years, I started to think about the future of human beings and robotics societies. And I think today I will have the pleasure to introduce my point of view of how dynamic societies can exist and what is needed for the future leaders.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome. And then we have, next to Konstantin, we have Andrei Kolyada, rector of EMA's Business School from Nizhny Novgorod. And he is also a board member of RABO, Russian Association of Business Education, and a person who is very active in this field in Russia and very respected. So you will hear from him more later. And then we have a special guest from a special school, and that is Nick Obolensky, professor from London School of Business. London Business School, I say, as far as I know, is London Business School, not
yeah, but it's slightly out of date, I'm afraid. Hello, everybody. I used to be at London Business School many years ago, but I'm now working with CEDAP in France, IMD. I'm only a professor for maybe 5% of my time. My background, I'm half Russian, half French, born in Canada, educated in England. I live in France, but based out of Shanghai in China. So it's all a pretty bit dynamic for me. And my specialty at the moment is delivering organizational leadership development to large companies. And what we do is we apply a new way of looking at things and looking at problems. And I hope to be able to share that with you later on. Thank you.
Thank you. So I didn't hear, where are you now situated?
Right now I'm in Moscow.
No, but I mean, where are you working?
I'm working in, I have a company in Shanghai, and I have a company in UK, and I'm working all over the world. We have teams working all over the place. So
in China.
I find it very difficult to answer that question, but
yes.
If we want a short answer, Shanghai.
Thank you very much. So that's very good, because then we have also very different perspectives. We are missing, of course, the South Africa, which is also in the BRIC countries. We are missing, what do we miss? We miss Latin America and so on. But in any case, we are quite an international group of people. Perhaps, Valeria, you want to say something about yourself too? What are you doing? You are Russian too, no?
Yeah, I'm Russian. Собственно, меня зовут Валерия Павлюковская. Я партнер.
My name is Valeria Pavlikovskaya. I'm a partner of IMD. So after decades, different managerial positions in e-commerce at Amazon.ru and other marketing agencies. I picked up business education, and I have a lot of experience in working in IMD, and as you know, it's been ranked #1 in business education for 6th consecutive year by the Financial Times, and Skolkovo also invited me to become an author of an MBA program, and for 4 years first of all, we drafted those programs, and then I run those MBA degrees here in Moscow. So right now I operate out of Switzerland. I'm a country manager for all Russian language countries, and I represent IMD Lausanne.
So you see that Russians are everywhere, which is very good. And I shall make a little introduction, just launch some ideas. I started in Factor A to explain why this topic, and I think that if we look I am coming out of my own experience, and especially working for 25 years with CEEMAN Association. I say that I would like to say that there is no clear. There are some characteristics common. I think common, but of course we have some experts here and some people who come from different parts of the world who can correct me, and you too all. So I invite you immediately to take part in the discussion. I think that something which is characteristic for dynamic society is that there is no clear split between politics and economy. You know exactly that the politics is very much present, if not mixing in economy. At least in my country, and I'm sure that here around too, there are politicians, especially when the companies are state companies, but even in France, it's not necessary to be an emerging economy. They are very much is politics mixed in the economy without too much knowledge, economic knowledge and other knowledge, which is very important in the business. Secondly, I think that another characteristic is that we don't have experienced labor relations and labor management relations. We don't have enough developed these relations. We don't have strong organizations in this field, or we have strong but no cooperation. They are, I can't say that they are fighting, because perhaps it's not that the right word, but this is certainly one of the problems. I know, because my husband comes from Netherlands, I see how these labor relations and relationship with labor, union, labor, and of course employers and so on, how they are having rules in their cooperation, and how they are bringing society on a higher level because they are because in their cooperation, on their way. And second thing is that that classical management models, as classical management models, are oriented on gradual change, not on disruptive change. I see that in dynamic economy, crisis management, out of which then it can come something good or bad, hopefully good, is not for special situation, but it is just becoming normal, as it is ice for Eskimos. It's just you are constantly going through change management, through crisis management. You don't, what I say often, come to our school or schools, because you will not need simulate the crisis, but you will see the crisis management and in the real situations all the time. And then, of course, classical strategic theories having another scope, certain 3 to 5 years or whatever, and this does not fit in dynamically developing economies neither. So, in all these situations, we are kind of laboratory of change in the world, and we are, on one way, attractive for others to come to learn. We are needing special skills and knowledge to be ready for that, and that's why we think that all our instruments in CEEMAN for improving management education, which we see as a real change agent, we see a very, very important role of management education as a change agent, as I said. And we are, in our educational institutions, trying to support the reforms. We could do more if we had more politicians coming to the school, because, as I said, politics is very much mixed in economy, and they don't have appropriate knowledge for that, and that's why often the decisions, there are bad decisions taken. Then I think that we are, how shall I say, we are very, very, we would like to be more, international and learn from the best, and then we are looking certain time to USA, then we look to another country. In my country, we look very much to the Nordic, the former socialist countries, because they have, we are a former socialist country, and we are looking to countries that have welfare, that they have, countries of welfare state, where they have similar things to socialism, like, good welfare for workers also, not only for the richest guys and so on. So where this sharing and spreading of the wealth is different, where there are not such a big differences among the rich and the poor and so on. And so we believe that in management education we can do more of that. After China came on this OBOR, the Belt and Road, they are also more interested now, and you will now correct me, Nick, if I'm wrong, but my impression is that they are also more interested now in other countries on the Silk Road than just to look to the United States, because they saw that it's not a real good example for them. So I have the impression, working quite a long time, being in this world, you go a little bit left and right, etc. And so what can really management education do in this situation? I really would like that we are discussing about that, and we shall, as I said, very much appreciate your contribution too. Now I would give the floor to Veselin, because I think that you are one of the most experienced people at this panel, Veselin Blagoev, and you were in politics. You were running different management development institutions. You traveled a lot through the world, and perhaps you can help us with some ideas.
Thank you very much. I'll take the mic here, if you don't mind.
You agree, I
on,
guess.
please. And try to match somehow the models of management to the specific cultural conditions, experiences, etc., which we have noticed or seen or researched in the last decades. Let me start with something which Danica remembers probably very well, something which Gerard Warszaik said in 2003 in one of the CEEMAN's conferences. That was IMFD, probably. Anyway, he said that, to his knowledge, there is no one successful joint venture of French and Dutch company. And he attributed this to the specifics of the national cultures of the two countries, which were seeing the management process in a different way. For example, this is obviously only an illustration. From the French perspective, the Dutch way of making decisions seems to be quite strange and quite unacceptable, while from Dutch perspective, the things are exactly at the other side. We will today say, probably after the discussion, that there is some convergence of the managerial practices across the world, and of course transfer of managerial practices thanks to the multinational corporations and the international corporations, the investors going to the dynamically developing societies. But altogether, we probably will agree that these are mostly practices than models as a whole, as we would take them from a theoretical point of view. So our task today seems to be a bit difficult. We've got to come to some conclusions about how to do the things. I will cover in this presentation a little bit on the cultural differences. And I will try to match the management mainstream, of course, management models and practices to the national cultures based on Hofstede's and Minkoff's and my also research. Trying to come up with some conclusions. The cultural differences, first of all, it's easy to see that there are differences between the national cultures. You see what's happening before the parliament, in front of the Dutch parliament and in front of the Bulgarian parliament. And even based on this, you can say that things are not identical. You know that we have been studying the national cultures for quite a time. This here is a slide which shows genetic analysis of the nations. You can see that the eastern and partly central part of Europe genetically differs from what is mostly presented in the western part. I'm not saying this is good, bad. It is really substantial, really influencing our behavior. For example, Niko Bolensky, who's on my left side there, a speaker, he's Rurik guy, you know, he's 33rd generation, someone from the Ruriks here, and he would probably be able to say more about how the genes influence the people. On the other side, you see Bulgaria, there is a clear mix of things. A few years back, 5 years ago, Mishminkov, Gerd Hofstede, you probably know Hofstede, most of you have heard about Hofstede, and I made the research and we mapped the national cultures, the countries in a way, in clusters which are pretty well defined. And we can see that there is a clear difference there on the map between the countries with certain specifics. For example, these are the European countries. Here you have the Anglo-Saxons. Here we are, Russia, Ukraine, Bulgaria, etc. in the middle, and so forth and so forth. So my point is that when we study these things seriously, based on World Value Survey parameters, we find things which make the countries enough well-defined in terms of their specifics. Mishminkov recently, a few months ago, made another analysis in the same way with 56 countries, and he was luckier than what we did with Hofstede 5 years back. His clusters imitate very well or replicate very well the map of the world, geographic map of the world, which is funny enough, but it also shows that there are specifics, and we can't avoid that. If we take it from a managerial perspective, of course, we can say The national cultures now define quite much of the cultural environment which we face when we manage certain companies, certain organizations, but there are also additionally accepted religious, professional norms, values. We have quite much coming from the globalization, and we have the new technologies also influencing the things fairly well. So we practically, when we take this operationally, from the point of view of I'm a manager, I have to manage this crew, we have to understand that practically we manage the people who are operating there or living there in the heart of this thing. So which is the right management model for them is clearly not clear. So as I told you, I did some research trying to match up the management models with the particular cultures. And let me show what I did. These are the mainstream management models. Most of you have studied these things. Natasha probably did not because she's a journalist. Valeria, sorry, my mistake. Valeria.
But Natasha is quite a Russian name.
Yeah. So you know.
So for you, it's just like everybody.
Yeah, so no, not like everybody. You know. I'm sorry. Yeah. So these models I try to study, see what happens. Pretty funny things, you know. First of all, emphasis on the management theory of management rules of the game. Emphasis on structure, what's good, what's bad for the corporation, etc. Henri Fayot, of course, the father of all these management models. And Frederick Taylor, etc. And if we take this thing as a mainstream, I like it very much, by the way, it comes up that based on Hofstede dimensions, we could say that the countries or national cultures where high power distance is specific and high uncertainty avoidance index is enough high. And then you have collectivism. It seems that in this sort of countries, this theory, the classical theory, should fit very well. And see what happens. You know, if you take it, Russia, Poland, Kyrgyzstan, Romania, and Slovakia seems to be fitting very well to this kind of models. I would guess that the Russians here in this auditorium could say whether Henri Fayot, this management model with the 14 necessary things there, for those who have studied Fayot, fit very well. I think it fits very well, this model. Funny enough, this comes up from the analysis of the indices of Hofstede. Then leading to motivation, you know Elton Mayo, Warren Bennis, Shine, fantastic models of management, where the emphasis is only on motivation and on group motivation, and where the leadership, Warren Bennis, for example, plays very, very important role. My analysis shows that countries with low power distance, with low uncertainty avoidance index and high individualism, or as Mishuminkov defines it, universalism, exists in this combination. These models fit fairly well. And it applies also to the new human relation theories, Maslow, McGregor, Herzberg, etc. Let me not mention them. See the countries which, according to the analysis, seem to be fitting very well to this kind of management theories. Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia fit fairly well there. You know. Ironically, however, see, Generation Y seems to be fitting also very well to this model. Motivate me, make me feel happy, give me the chance of believing I'm doing it my own way, and things like that. So those models seem to be fitting better the Generation Y guys. Then the organization as an organism, you know these theories. for Bertalanffy, Luhmann, etc. You know, let us the organization seen as an organism. Wherever you touch in the organization, it affects the whole performance of the corporation, of the organization. Very, very good idea or point of view on the things. There are a number of theories which fit in here, like the catastrophe is here, chaos theory, Tavistock is here also. I specifically like the contingency theory, which I place also in this area, which is very, very good to my heart. It basically states that there's no one model which fits always, and especially out of all the models which might be defined there, I like Goleman's theory. He defines the leader's style, but which means also the management style, as an array of clubs in a golf professional's bag. In other words, you have to be always able, ready, willing, and able to pick up the right stick there in solving the particular specific management problems and also to handle the situations to the best of the organization. From the point of view of, from the results of the analysis which I made, probably the high power distance, low uncertainty avoidance, and high collectivism, or as Mishminkov defines it, exclusionism index should be fitting very well. And guess which country fits in there? Nico will say more about that, but China is so adaptive, you know, in all the ways. They even changed their names. All Chinese guys have American names these days. There's no one left with his Chinese name only. So they seem to be fitting fairly well to this contingency theory. Although, outstate, from my professional experience, I've been managing different institutions in my career, and it fits Bulgaria also as, fairly well, but based on Hofstede's dimensions indices, we don't fit there. Then I'll cut it short, of course. We don't have too much time for this. The matrix theory is a very, very important mainstream also. I did participate in Bulgaria in the 70s and 80s. We were trying to implement it there in Bulgaria, and we collapsed in every attempt to do it there in Bulgaria because it did not fit to the national culture at all. We could not make the people understand that the dual management or hierarchical management, to have more bosses, you know, could still work, you know. The people did not love that. They wanted one boy to be ahead, one boy to give them instruction, or girl, of course. I have to be careful with boy and girl. You know that since last summer in New York officially there are 31 genders. So if I have to count all of them, that would be too much. So one person to be the boss. Then for effective leadership, interpersonal has to be there, all these things. And in our culture, for example, who's more important always comes at stake, which is not good for us, but this is how it works. Anyway, my analysis shows that countries with low power distance, low uncertainty avoidance, and Nordic or Germanic orientation, cultural orientation, fit fairly well. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and the Czech Republic seem to be fairly well, theoretically at least, not in practice. I don't claim this is the practice, but theoretically should be able to adopt the matrix model fairly well. What failed in my country? There are not clear cases, countries whose national culture I could not, you know, fit to any one of the models. Bulgaria is there. You know, ironically, Kazakhstan is there. Elena Pavlovna, Kazakhstan is always there. Slovenia, Danica, believe it or not, you know. Yeah, yeah. Funny enough, Armenia also is there, although I could not get numbers indices. Anyway, so what should we say then if this is the result of the analysis? We have to probably look more into the managerial practices than to the models, and say that, for example, in America, Jack Welch, but also how many of those like Jack Welch were advocating the view that we have to run every year some kind of test and cut off the heads of 10% of the people, no matter what are their results in numbers, if they don't fit well into the fitness exercise which we organize for them. This will stimulate all the people to give their best and to be more active and to be more productive. That was the American way. At the other extreme, I would remind you Akio Morita, who said that he had never fired anybody in his professional life, and he cannot understand the American way of doing the things. This is a totally different culture, and you have to agree probably with me that different or not, it's obviously different, it does produce also excellent results. Let me mention just-in-time and things like that, which work perfectly in Japan, and they did not work in America, for example, not to mention Bulgaria as well. So it seems that the best model or practice turns out to be quite questionable. Something which in some parts looks excellent, and then you see it's empty at the other end, So what do? We have to be very careful when we implement management practices and models. If we do it just technically, passing it from here there, we might get an apple which looks like this one. Being managers, we have to do it wisely and do everything as it should be. Altogether, this kind of a conclusion, we have to say that what we discuss turns to be mostly transfer of good managerial practices which produce results in the particular circumstances and particular environments based on the cultural analysis. I will skip this because we should be fast. I just want to say as a conclusion that although there might be no way to define the best management theories and practices, but there's always the chance to survive, in this hostile environment in which we operate as professional managers. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is anybody having... Yeah, whatever.
What's most challenging for you for now? Well, besides that your own country is in the list of those who you can't classify. What are the most challenging things you see from your point of view, from the background or from the level on which you gained already? What are the most interesting tasks or challenges you see for yourself?
Thank you. I've been a manager, including CEO of different institutions, including a bank. I've been head of the Bulgarian privatization for some time. I was head of the Bulgarian state administration for quite a time. And in all these environments in which I have been operating, I was facing one and the same thing. You've got to go there with your bag of sticks and pick up the right stick. There was no way to apply one model only and expect sustainable positive results. This is my impression. So the most important thing is don't forget your bag with sticks and always analyze and pick up the right one. Thank you.
Any other remark, question? Then I shall ask my panel here, who feels to talk? Who feels the wish to talk now? Who could comment on that or whatever? Probably
just to share my...
Okay, yeah, please do.
Yes.
Нормально, да? Должно заработать? Так, it's on, yeah, now it doesn't work. Yeah. Oh, okay, now it's working.
Sure.
Magical.
Yes.
Спасибо большое.
Well, thank you very much. So basically, I'll repeat. My name is Valeria Pavlikovskaya, partner at IMD, International Business School, that specializes in top management, having offices in Lausanne, Switzerland, and Singapore. I'd like to share my personal opinion, our personal view of the problem, and start our discussion with a question which is kind of provocative. How indeed, what proof indeed we have to say that dynamic societies or communities are indeed special, that they have different and distinct leadership models. Maybe we should talk today about a number of global cardinal changes happening now that in their turn are transforming the universal leadership and management model, and we should rather think about this model. So that was the question. In order not to sound unfounded, let me address your experience as a consumer of our services, because having been executive director of a leading school worldwide and the author of the leadership program at Skolkovo, I would like to address my own opinion as a consumer, as a student, what they expect from programs in Russia and abroad. Do they really expect and demand of business schools some other special knowledge if they themselves propose to keep working in the so-called dynamic communities such as Russia, or if they're planning to move abroad to get involved in a more global community? I'm not going to list all the characteristics, but the important thing I want to mention is that on one cup of the scales, we have students' expectations, or there are expectations of Russian students to Russian programs and expectations of Russian students to international schools, and they're identical. We see that the scales go in favor of expectations for equality, composition of a class, the involvement of best professors from the leading business schools of the world with real-life business experience, to have insights from different cultures, how to lead a business in different countries. But what's more important, the insights into the current trends, how they impact my business, myself as a leader. And perhaps the most important thing is what is this new leadership model is all about. There's an understanding that requirements to leaders and leadership traits are changing. Leaders who were effective yesterday may not be as effective today, or even so, even more tomorrow. So how should I change? And here we see identical consumer requirements to business schools, and they strongly outweigh the other component, like being able to learn with translation, local expertise. Of course, we want to understand seemingly effective relevant, universal knowledge, how they have already been implemented in Russia by Russian companies. So therefore we want to hear local business cases, want to listen to local experts who would share their experience with us. And what's also important, we quite often hear from Russian students, because again, I'm referring to my own personal experience. They want to see more cases and insights how leadership model work, not for huge enterprise and corporation that worldwide leading worldwide business schools are talking about, but how it applies to small and medium business. Also, I wouldn't call it a requirement to the managerial model. It's rather a distinction regarding the expectations that students apply to Russian programs and the programs of the leading international business schools. It's about the lack of preparedness on behalf of the Russian students to work hard. Again, it's a consumer perspective. But it says that hardly we can talk about cardinal changes between management models, between different communities. It's rather that there are models that exist day to day and that affect the leadership model. So what are these trends? What do the consumers, the students identify as the most sensitive trends that are changing their own leadership reality? It's not only about the continuous presence and the pace of change, digitalization that is being talked about all over the place. It's about the change of the world of work and the relationship between employers and employees. What motivates one people and doesn't motivate other people? One motivation system in a company doesn't work any longer. So how can we go about that? And what should we do about that? There's a trend of a new type of a consumer. And also, an interesting trend that we're also hearing a lot about in different conferences and forums. It's about the longevity of life expectancy, and also a multi-career nature of our life that we now have to reinvent ourselves throughout the lifetime, going through 4 or 5 different careers in different industries and different roles. So all these trends certainly affect how leaders and companies look at business schools. And of course, there's a lot of criticism. The criticism of business schools, what they are, what they teach, claims that even the leading business schools apply archaic or outdated approaches. That requires, therefore, we need to listen to the comments that companies apply to business schools. How, as a leader, I should look at business schools. There are lots of alternatives now. There are corporate universities that are opening their doors for students from the outside. There are lots of consulting companies that have entered into the competition with business schools. There are lots of exciting online education players, startups, that quite often present much better information in a much consumable, it's much more consumable format. Again, why should I bypass all those leadership? A cobbler without shoes. It's being frank. It's good that all of you as prefectors should are talking about changing all the time. But what are you doing to do that in that vein? If we look at curricula of even the leading business schools of the world, we quite often see that the professor has forgotten to take the date, which happens to be 2007 when the class is being given in 2017. And even rankings such as Financial Times, Economist, when they are ranking business schools, they should also start taking account of how adaptive different business schools' curricula are. How relevant they are to the current requirement that business sets. Of course, it's the educational agenda should be a co-creational process between business and schools. Business should also provide their own inputs and share expectations, and business schools should adjust. What's not new but has become even more important now, it's about the immediacy of the outcome for business, not about finishing the program and then starting to try it out in your real life, but no, immediately, once you get the new insights that you are able to implement them in your real business. And also what we hear a lot, we do as AMD about 200 customized programs for companies from very different countries and industries. Again, the idea that we are arriving more and more often. Okay, they're saying changes are happening, different thoughts about different leadership and managerial model. It's obvious that yesterday's leader is not going to be the leader tomorrow. But what's the leader for tomorrow? Is there a model? Is there a description? What new characteristics do you see to define someone as an effective leader for tomorrow? And here, I'd like to share with you the model that IMD developed together with Net Operator. It's not a revolution. It's a result of a lot of research that was covered not only by not only covered developed countries but the entire world, and that's why I believe this model is universal, which doesn't take away the characteristics, the importance of the existing characteristics of leaders, but that singles out the new characteristics that we believe not a lot of current leaders have. For a characteristic, humble. A leader should be humble. It's new. It's news. Humbleness. Then adaptable. Being able to adapt not only to new business conditions, but also to new people, to the requirements of your employees, who are also changing. It's engaged and being visionary. So here we don't see what we are accustomed to hear, charisma, autocracy. Where is this authority, this power? Dictatorship? No, a leader is turning into someone who is actually positions himself below the employees, whereas the employees, the subordinates, are no longer subordinates. They are becoming the driving force of the company. Such behaviors are really becoming more effective, more relevant, providing the effectiveness for tomorrow and beyond. There are three such components. Hyper-awareness. And in fact, we have a lot of information around us, so we need to analyze it all the time. Then technologies, not to get drowned by it, but to be able to look around, to be aware. Informed decision-making. Intuition is great, but unfortunately it's going to the background. Nobody gives up on intuition, but this huge amount of information that's available to us is there to help us make more informed decisions. And fast execution, even faster execution, looks like nothing new, but the requirements to these behaviors are huge. To make decisions immediately, to implement, to execute on them immediately, prototyping, experimenting. If you had to measure 7 times earlier and cut only once, as this Russian saying goes, no, it's the other way around now. Perfectionism is out of vogue, is out of fashion now. It's more about creativity, being able and wanting to experiment. So these are the characteristics, so that we shouldn't just go blah blah. We have to understand. We don't have time or a possibility to discuss it now, but we found answers to these questions and to this. And tonight, when I'm going to speak at a session of MBA in the era of technology breakthroughs, I'll share our conclusions, our approaches, so that this model shouldn't just remain a model, but so that it should become instrumental to help leaders as individuals and companies to become those effective leaders that will not only just survive, but will be effective in leading their companies tomorrow and beyond. So this is just a view that allows me to tend closer to the opinion that we should talk about the global changes and universal, and the changes in the universal leadership model, rather than some big differences between communities. But it's just a view. It's just a perspective, which, as I said, is also based on my own private experience. Thank you.
My colleagues here, after I ask you for a question or remark, whether anybody of you would feel like the need and the wish to immediately now to continue the conversation. Okay, so I shall give you the word, and before that I shall ask if anybody from the public has any question to the panelists. To our Natasha Valeria. Yes?
У меня вопрос технический.
I have a technical question. On one hand, you work in Switzerland. On the other one, you have some experience in Russia, CIS, and Singapore. Can you explain the area of your competency, the scope, where you are in reality? Okay. I'm a person of the world. Switzerland is where the main IMD campus is located. IMD is an international school, so it has several campuses. That's why I mentioned Singapore, because in order to be represented in Asia, the school opened a campus there. The school itself is international. It works with customers, companies, individuals all over the world. And the school, as such, is backed in Switzerland, in Lausanne. That's why I'm saying that live in Switzerland, in Lausanne. I'm Russian, and I have experience in business education, both in Russia, I mentioned Skolkovo, and internationally. Like, for instance, now I'm in this company and in IMD. I develop programs for Russian language markets. Russia, CIS, Ukraine. Have I helped you to orient? Thank you.
Any other question? For me, it was interesting to listen to what you mentioned about the trends, because we made in CEEMAN research in 11 countries, and we interviewed hundreds of companies' presidents and HR managers, and then we came to the trend, what they were saying, like you said, globalization, digitalization, demographic trends, strong need for innovation, new business models, entering foreign markets, and new strategic priorities. And they say the problem is that the future is fully unpredictable. So how can you make the priorities, really? And then, of course, we are talking about internal challenges, applying new technologies, generational gaps, shortage of flexible and innovative skills and competences, and staff engagement. And then we also came to 10 most important competences. And perhaps I shall say later something about that. And now I shall give the floor to my colleague, Andrei Kolyada from Nizhny Novgorod. Andrei?
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed Dr. Dynamically. I want to begin with saying, the words of gratitude for being here. It's a pleasure to share my ideas with such a respected group of professionals. And actually, why I asked Dr. Dynamically to give the turn to me, because, the life is a really amazing thing, and it's really interesting to see how same ideas came to different heads. And I want to say my special thanks to Valeria, because you will see that what I am going to share with you right now, this is a direct continuation of what she just presented. Maybe because, I don't know, it happens that we both manage schools, and what you will see right now, this is a 100% a personal touch. I mean, this is what I am doing like a top manager of school. And the task we are solving actually. Oh, can you switch it back? Можно включить обратно презентацию? Yeah, thank you. And, actually, yeah, I think they will settle it somehow. Верните, пожалуйста, да, презентацию.
If you could please the presentation back, please.
And due to obvious limitation in time, actually, within the set of ideas, within the big variety of ideas I wanted, to be honest, to share with you, I just took two of them. And I don't know how to switch it, actually. Yeah, this one. And the first one, I want to share what I think about the perspective of education, or business education, I would say better, in general, I mean globally, and in the Central and Eastern Europe in particular. And the second issue which I want to discuss is which chances or opportunities we can now get due to new technologies, I mean online technologies mainly. And obviously, due to the limitation of time, I don't have just an opportunity to discuss it in depth. So we should just consider it like rather a set of theses and ideas, and each of them, and some of them are even controversial, I would say, each of them requires a further discussion and maybe researches actually. And this is a coincidence because Valerio just told exactly what I actually wanted to talk and to share, so I just need to repeat that in my opinion the question of division of societies for so-called mature and from one hand, and on the other hand transient or dynamically changing is a little bit in a question right now. Maybe we can be brave enough even to say that maybe it's a little bit outdated approach to the question. Why actually? The answer is rather simple, because we are within the hurricane of technology, and the changes, the pace, the speed of changes is so impressive and so big that I think it's a matter of fact that our life is changing every day. And what is actually true is that we will be missing some professions in just a couple of years due to the artificial intelligence and all that, big bulk of online technologies. For instance, in my school, UMass, actually what we do at the moment, we are heavily investing, let's say like this. We are doing a lot of projects towards automatization. For instance, right now we are creating our own online IT system in order to be honest, to reduce the stuff which support the teaching process in a very great extent. Because we understood that we can get the artificial intelligence who can take the absolute majority of their responsibilities. In fact, due to these attempts, we will give an opportunity to our people, because we are not going to fire anyone thanks to this, but we will give to our support staff an opportunity to work more on more interesting, not so routine tasks, like for instance developing of our faculties, developing of our students, giving them that personal touch, because every one of us requires personal touch in the long run. And that is why, and it is funny, I truly support Varelia's arguments, and I also think, and actually we do, and we work within that actually track, that to be honest, every society now is transient. And either you are transient, I mean society, or you are dead, because new technology is a challenge for every one of us. And now I want to bring the bridge to education actually, and to say that in my opinion, okay, I will back from the other actually side. 10, 15 years ago, we had a lot of conversation and discussion about the future of education. I mean that a lot of people clearly expressed their alarming concerns that just emerging online technologies, they were going to kill classical classroom education. And it didn't happen in the past, and I'm sure that it will not happen in the future. But at the same time, I have an opinion that actually what will happen with classical classroom courses, they will be narrowed to become the premium part of the educational landscape, educational market. And the answer is very simple, why it's going to happen like this, in my opinion. Just because we have very, very sad truth. and I want actually to highlight this truth. The truth is like this: the world is poor. I mean that the absolute majority of the world's population, they spend their life in poverty. They just don't have enough money, don't have opportunities to go to classroom schools to get good education. And I think that this absolute majority of world's population, which is poor, at least some of them, I think the majority of them, they are looking for all possible means and tools in order to find the ways to escape from that poverty. And they didn't have any, to be honest, before, until the world get modern online technologies. And now they have. Because online, this is, a perfect mixture of very important things. It is cheap. 5, 10, even more times cheaper than classroom analogs. It is convenient, it is accessible for everyone who has at least, stable internet connection. That is why I think that, and this is my first point I want to underline, I think that in the coming years we will see a steady trend according to which classroom courses, they are going to become rather premium everywhere in the world, not only in the Western Europe or in Russia. And the question who will take over the rest of the market, online market, educational market, sorry, online courses will do this, I think. And during the last 3-5 years, we also in Russia, in Western Europe, I'm quite often, visiting different conferences all over the world, and there were a lot of concern, alarming concern about possible discrepancy in terms of quality between classroom courses and educational courses. But I can assure you actually that today teaching professionals in who do online courses, they learn how to do them with reasonable quality. Of course, if we are talking about schools who do everything in a proper way, not fake schools. So teaching professionals, they learned how to do online courses with reasonable quality, convenience, and what is also important, because it is constantly asking questions, they learned how to do a networking for participants. And I can just, to make you confident that this is truth, because this is undisputable truth, to be honest. I can just say one simple fact, that a lot of well-established Western European schools, classroom schools, they have already launched online version of their MBAs and executive education programs, and they succeed. By the way, I can also confirm this with my own experience, because at the moment I manage CEEMAN business school, and actually we are number 6 today according to Russian national ranking in MBAs in Russia, and we have all 3 types of MBAs. We have classroom MBAs in Moscow and in Nizhny Novgorod. We conduct them in 2 cities, 2 independent cohorts. We have blended learning MBAs and we have online MBAs. And we have a bulk of statistics about that, and I can assure you that there is no any difference when we are talking about exam results, when we are talking about project results done by our students, and we are talking about when we measure the level of satisfaction of our students using special questionnaires. So this brings me to the idea that we are going to see in the coming years the great shape, the great changes within the educational landscape, and online is going to take over the mass market of the market, part of the market. And there is one more reason also which I want to bring to your attention. I think it's quite important for every one of us, at least for Central and Eastern European schools, because it is alarming. In 3-5 years, the world will get a technology. In fact, to be honest, it is already developed and it is already tested. I mean, it is working right now. So, but why I'm talking about 3-5 years, because it will get the great part of distribution all over the world. So in 3-5 years we will see the technology which allows everyone and speaking and understanding a foreign language without knowing it, which clearly means for us that we will see the removal of the language barrier. The technology is very simple. Everyone can just check what I'm talking right now in the search engine. This is a mixture of special earphones and the smartphone, and you just switch it on, you understand what it's talking about on a foreign language. And for us, I am addressing, right now mainly the Central and Eastern European schools. For us, it means that we are going to face a big challenge because we will see the leak of our students to so-called affordable Western business schools. Why I'm talking affordable? Because I mean, that part of schools who offer, a tuition fee within the range, let's say, 10,000–15,000 US$. And why it's going to happen like this? Because it's a matter of fact, we are still within the situation when Western education is considered as more prestigious rather than Russian, Polish, Bulgarian, whatever. And unfortunately, it is that truth. I don't think that we will see the backflow, which means that I don't think that anyone will go from Western Europe to our country to have Russian MBAs, or Bulgarian at least. That is why every one of us, everyone who manages schools in this part of the world, I think we should ask one simple question: what we are going to do with that problem? And the answer, in my opinion, is going global, because I don't know how to switch it. It doesn't work.
The last one.
Yeah, I'm just pressing it, but it doesn't work. Okay, so you should just listen what I'm talking about. Which means just very simple thing. This is a question of our living. We have to do something with that. We have to go international, actually. We have to go global. And in my opinion, I see the window of opportunity here because there is a market niche. On one hand, we have a lot of clearly faked, so-called degree mills, who offers fake education, which is not true. But on the other hand, we have very well established Western European or US or British, whatever, universities and business schools who offer their executive education, which is very expensive, or even too much expensive for the absolute majority of people. And this is a gap. This is a market niche, in my opinion. And I think that we should do everything what is possible to use this window of opportunities. And if I am right, if I'm not wrong, if I'm right, this means that we have to, thank you very much, we have to, still doesn't work. Could you switch it, please?
Shall we not be disturbed by that?
Yeah. So this means that we have to pay attention about discussion of possible players who can use this window of opportunity together with us. Obviously, the first group of players is very well-established Western business schools. But I am a little bit doubt about their desire and their capability to go to mass market online programs, just because, in my opinion, they have clear controversial with that possible move, and with their very well-established, I want to underline it, premium established brands. There is no match between going into cheap part of the market with online cheap programs and having very expensive brands through their history. Obviously, one more possible group of players are Chinese. Chinese are very good, and I think Danica can support me, here, that they are very strong. Their progress is very impressive. But this is my personal perception. No, this is the other way. They are still too much specific, at least the most of them too much specific for other nations. They still need some years to go forward here. Indians are also very strong, but they have some technical hurdles. Just for instance, they have still very weak internet connection in some regions of the country. That is why, and I'm coming to the end because I have my partners who also want to share their ideas. That is why I think that we have a chance, and maybe this is one chance for 100 years, and I want to address it to my Russian and Eastern European colleagues. I am sure that we must, I want to highlight it, must do it, because this is really inspiring. We must do every possible efforts to go global, to become international, and obviously the task is not easy. not easy. But for those who can express doubts about the possibilities that we can do this, I just want to remind one very simple fact, that we are Russians and we were first in space. And I don't really think, frankly speaking, to be honest, that 60 years ago, when we became the first in space, the task was much more easy rather than we are discussing right now. And the very final point, which I want to highlight also because it's very, very also important, the task is difficult, it's true, it's really complicated. That is why we should really welcome and invite every possible partner from US, from UK, from European Union and other nations who want to join the journey and to go together with us. Because it's inspiring, it is really interesting at the very end, in the long run. Thank you very much.
I'm sure that there are questions on. I would allow just one short for a short answer, because we have still two speakers, and I'm sure interesting ones.
Can I make a note? I'm sorry.
Пожалуйста, Андрей, все-таки сам... Добрый день.
Marina Skalina, professor from Timirazov Academy of Agriculture. Now here's a question to you. Can you give us 2 or 3 areas where our schools can be better than prestigious, well-established Western institutions? Or maybe what are the 2 major challenges that prevent us from becoming as well-established as Western schools?
There is one point, only one point, not 3 of them, which clearly distinguish and makes our life more complicated in comparison with our Western partners. Just one, the country image. But I think still we can do a lot with it, because I want to remember that a lot of regions in the world, they still respect Russia, they still respect Soviet Union, and they know that we have reasonable quality of education. All the rest, I mean, the list of differences, it's really big. I can name 100 actually, but it's really technical. Really tough story is just one, the country image. That's it.
Great, thank you. So I would now give the floor to Nico Wolensky, and then we go further. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, I'll need the clicker, I think. I hope it works. So, well, if you could put what I'd like to do is maybe just change the frame a little of what we've been discussing, because the subject of dynamic societies and the role of business schools, I think we need to have a more dynamic viewpoint. We need to move from what I call 1.0 thinking to 4.0 thinking. And I'm not saying 1.0 thinking is wrong, but we need to have some contradictory views and therefore a more dynamic view. So in order to try and explain what the hell it is I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about why, what, and how. Let's look at first the why. I think we need to take a sort of wide view of ourselves as species. Homo sapiens has been around for about 100 to 150,000 years. If we look at a 2% of that timeline, that's 4,000 years of history, and we look at advances of technology, things have been pretty sleepy on this planet for a long time. Majority of spend in technology is military technology. I used to be a soldier. I was a major in the British Army. Technology has been slow, but suddenly it's exploded in our ability to kill people at a distance while we remain safe. For thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, it was a bow and arrow. If Napoleon had given his army bows and arrows, we'd all be doing this in French. And today we have so many ways of killing each other, it's rather depressing. And the same for communication technology and transportation technology. Suddenly there has been an explosion. in our lifetime, in 1 or 2 generations. Now, we don't feel this. I mean, we get up, we go to work, we go home, we go to bed, we get up, we go to work, we go home, we go to bed, and we do that again and again and again, go on holiday, and then we die. So we are the frog in boiling water. We don't feel this. And what's also the impact is human awareness has jumped. And, you know, from Andre, it's going to get, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of a connectivity in human awareness. And yet we still talk about things in 1.0 terms. We still talk about educating leaders for tomorrow. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying we talk about these problems of tomorrow using language of the past because that's probably all we have. What's interesting about this trend, though, is there's one thing that hasn't really changed, and that's our assumption of what leadership is. We still have a view of leaders at the top and followers at the bottom, and I think this is a big bifurcation, or if you like, a break. And I think business schools, if they want to help societies, organizations, and individuals to be more dynamic, I think they need to contribute with a more dynamic approach. And I'm not saying the old approach is wrong. But the essential fact is we still have a 1.0 view of leadership. We have people at the top, we'll call them leaders. We have people in the middle, and what do we call them? Oh, we'll call them managers, which is great, so we can have a great discussion about the difference between management and leadership. And then we have all the guys at the bottom, we'll call them, I don't know, workers or colleagues. Actually, I'm working with Alibaba, and they call each other Chin, which means darling, which is a little disturbing. But anyway, that's the Chinese. And leadership goes down. It's a 1.0 view. We've redefined it. 150 years ago, it's a heroic leader. 100 years ago, it's the deterministic leader. 60 years ago, the empowering leader. 40 years ago, the visionary leader, transformational leader. 20 years ago, the humility, the humble leader with Collins, which isn't new. It's been around. And now we have the servant leader. We have the quiet leader. We have so many, and we go through the sort of redefinitions in business schools. And I'm a graduate of IMD, so I love the model. But okay, so old wine, new bottle, it will sell. Probably give a shelf life of 3 years, and then you can redefine it. And we redefine, and that's okay. I mean, it helps people move forward. I'm not saying it's wrong, but maybe we need to take a different view. Maybe we need to extend this, because the fact of the matter is things are becoming much more complex. Organizations are becoming more complex. Communities are becoming more connected. We're moving from the machine, if you like, view to a much more dynamic view. Governments, the top is national government, the middle is local government, the bottom is the communities. Even government is struggling with how to handle this because we have that 1.0 view. And the reality is, in organizations, we talked about matrix earlier, we also need to start thinking about leading sideways. Now, we don't call that leadership. I think HR call that influencing without power because they have a 1.0 mindset. But we call that leading sideways. We need to think about leadership going sideways, not just downwards. It doesn't stop there in terms of having a more dynamic view, because to solve the problems of today, the fact is the people at the top don't know the answers anymore. In all our research, we found that most solutions do not come from the top, only maybe 10, 15%. So the people at the top don't know the answers anymore. They know they don't know, but they can't say they don't know, because they're expected to know by everybody else who know that they don't know anyway. So the people at the top don't know, the people at the bottom know the people at the top don't know, but we're stuck with this 1.0 view. And so we're saying, well, leaders of the future should be able to solve problems of the future, but that's still a 1.0 view. And I think leadership of the future is not about leading when you know. Leadership of the future is about leading when you don't know and having a much more dynamic view and knowing how to follow and how to lead. So we have 1.0, we have 2.0, and now what we need is 3.0, which is leadership going upwards. So in terms of communities, I think communities have a responsibility for leading upwards and pushing solutions upwards, rather than waiting to be led by leaders who have new competencies. I think we need a much more dynamic view of these problems. I think we need to look at leadership going sideways, upwards, as well as downwards. And I think we would call that leadership 4.0. And I think when we look at the role of business schools then in this dynamic, I think we need to extend what we do. I think it's the heads, the hands, and the hearts. I think we need much more research in dynamic views of leadership which move away which moves leadership away from leaders. We need to stop talking about what do future leaders look like in the future. I think we need to look at what is a dynamic view of leadership in the future and therefore have a much more broader approach. We need to have a different way of how we look at the models. You know, the subject of this conference is dynamic societies and management models. Well, that's an oxymoron. Management model is a 1.0 view. What we need to do is look at a dynamic view in terms of enabling societies and groups of people to have a dynamic approach to solving problems rather than having leaders who've been trained in wonderful things like MBAs. I'm not saying MBAs are going to go out of fashion. I'm not saying Leadership 1.0 is going to disappear. I'm just saying business schools, as the thought leaders in society, I think need to challenge some of the traditional views we have. And the final thing is heart. The belief that we have in business schools of training leaders in the future, I think we also need to start having a much wider view about how we can have a more dynamic approach to education. Andre mentioned, for example, that there are going to be millions of people going online and learning. How can business schools tap into that population rather than just sort of focusing on the ones that pay the money? And I think it's a both-and solution here. It's not either-or. So while I have perhaps given a contrary view to competency models, to 1.0 view, I think it's both and I think in order to solve some of the problems, I think we need to be a little bit more dynamic and approach this with a dynamic viewpoint rather than just the traditional deterministic linear one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for bringing us back to the track. Really, very good. So, any remark, any question? If not, we shall give the floor to our last speaker, to Konstantin Shamble, the General Director of the Center for Strategic Intercultural Communication.
Включите, да, слайды, пожалуйста. Дамы и господа, позвольте выступить.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will speak in Russian. This will be easier for me. Thank you very much, Stanitsa. Thank you for your warm words and introduction, for the opportunity to speak here today. Now, I would like to talk about a management model that will probably be operational in the next 10 years. I have no engineering education. I have a degree in humanities, and that's why I take the approach of the humanitarian educator when I look at new technical innovations. Now, I'd like to give you some of the megatrends that we've identified. Some say there are 17 or 20 megatrends, but I've picked the top 5 megatrends. I don't claim to have the ultimate truth, but I think these are the most important ones. So very often we use dynamic societies, dynamic countries. So I think this is an outdated model. We don't need to think in terms of countries. We won't live in terms of countries. We will live in the context of specific ethnic groups, or in terms of, we need to think in terms of cities. Moscow is not Russia and Paris is not France. You know, what is happening in some of the Chinese cities does not really reflect the reality in the countryside. So let's step aside from this nation-specific or country-specific look at our history. Rather, we need to focus on divisions in competencies and the level of life. So urbanization is the megatrend number 1. So by 2050, most of the people on planet Earth will live in mega cities. So these are people with a population between 100 and 250 million. So one mega city will have a larger population than a country. This is important because this will lead to new type of interactions between people. This will lead to social consequences. Now, the society of knowledge, that's trend number 2. We talk a lot about knowledge, but we often forget that knowledge without applied science or without practice is empty. At business schools today, and one of the speakers mentioned that, we train people, and the coaches, the trainers, are people who are not practitioners in those particular disciplines. You know, I know people who lecture in banking or marketing, but they've never worked as bankers or marketers, so they just give theory. So you have explicit knowledge and implicit knowledge. You have to differentiate between them. So explicit knowledge is something that you can read and understand, but there are some skills which you can only learn by doing. Well, if I was supposed to, teach someone how to read a bike, there's one way, you can just give them a book. People won't be able to ride a bike, although they might have studied the entire encyclopedia on how to ride the book. So here you need the practical skill set. Okay, moving on to the next trend. Aging of the working population. By 2050, the retirement age would be 90 to 95 years. That would mean that there would be working teams that would consist of people who are 15 and who are 90. And certainly that would pose a major social challenge. And now move on to the last mega trend. So these are the breakthrough medical technology that's related to the aging of the working population. Very often, women visit medical centers, to become healthier and younger. This is a mega trend, and it will gain ground in the future. And there's an expectation that in the next 30 to 40 years, you will have two people. One will be 18, and the other would be 65, and you wouldn't know the difference. You wouldn't be able to tell which age. So there would be a major problem. So it's good. Everyone needs to look better, but everyone needs to look younger. But I would like to go back to the megatrend of the aging of the working population. It will be really difficult to handle and manage people with who represent different generations and different mentality. So when you see a young girl, you know she's 20 and you have an understanding what kind of generation she is. Generation I, Generation Y, what kind of taste she has. But imagine next to her you have a person who looks similar, who looks 20, but whose mentality is of a 65-year-old woman. And she's the person of a previous generation. She was born in the Soviet Union.
Going for aesthetical operations
That's true.
to get younger.
Это действительно так. Я даже уверен, что мужчин будет больше.
Well, I'm sure there will be more men in the future doing those surgery operations. Well, again, a team of professionals would be built from people of different generations, different social strata, and different mentality. And another trend that I've overlooked here is major migration flows. It means that we would have people not just from different social strata, generations, we would also have people from different ethnic groups, different mentality. And that's a huge challenge. We talk a lot about multicultural teams. But what are the leading institutions, business schools, that train in multiculturalism? I don't think there are any. They all teach marketing, leadership, but no one teaches multiculturalism, diversity in culture. And they all speak English, mainly. It's all English language training. So our thinking is closely related to the language. It's done in the language that we think is native, that we think is mother tongue. And this is really what makes our communication between cultures so difficult. And the fourth megatrend is robotization. So a lot of jobs will be replaced by robots going forward. And as Mr. Obolensky said, we had the top-down management system, or leadership type. And that top-down leadership type, will certainly vanish, because there will be no people who would, who will be cleaners. You won't have people who will guard your facilities. It will be done by robots. How can you use top to bottom leadership style if you have robots? Now, if you stick to the economic model of leadership, economic management model, then we are in for this future. Robots robots cannot fall ill. They cannot have bad moods. That's why, according to the economic management model, people will be replaced. So these are the skills of future managers. So they're critical skills, but no business school trains them. Now, based on the megatrends, I think that the following features will be important. Linguistic skills. Regardless of whether you have online translating devices, will still be divided by the language, and each linguistic group will have their own mentality, their own worldview. Those leaders who will work in multicultural companies, and any transnational organization today, at its top managers would be represented by people from different cultures. So multiculturalism will move deeper down. You'll have Russian, Latinos, Chinese people, or someone from North Korea, and someone from Africa. Now, if you don't know 5 or at least 6 languages, you won't be able to run those people, even on the psychology level, on emotional level. Going down, physical and psychological recovery. Most of the top managers who've been working with us, and I represent a German company that offers advanced training. Like 15 years ago, the most popular trainings were on sales, on management. Right now, the most trainings in demand are in stress management. So we often find a lot of medications, a lot of pills on the tables of people who come to us. So it means people are under stress. 80% of senior managers focus on their business so heavily that they don't have time for their private life. And even in their private life, they always try to solve their business challenges. It means that they are overly stressed. And most of the people who come to the doctor, they are diagnosed with obesity and with back pain. So why we focus so much on marketing? Why we focus so much on financing? But why we completely ignore stress management and psychological recovery? I think medicine, health is something that business schools need to focus on. The next one, self-identification in an ambivalent environment. We feel ourselves Germans, Russians, but that's an older model. It only works when you live in a monolithic society or in a pseudo-cultural society like Russia, where you have 160 ethnic groups, but where everyone feels or at least identifies themselves as Russians. So we have representatives of different cultures and nations. When you have a French mother, a Russian father, when you were born in Canada, you served in the British Army, well, it's silly to ask that person what is their nationality, because it's a silly question. And hopefully we will have more people like that, and they will have an issue in terms of self-identification. It's hard for them to say who they are by nationality. So it's a stereotype thinking when you are asked who you are and you say, I'm Russian. That's too stereotypic. Now, moving on. Managing diverse teams. So again, because they will have so many languages, so many mentalities, we'll have diverse teams. And multiculturalism is extremely good in terms of brainstorming, in terms of giving rise to new ideas. But there's also a potential for conflict. It's like poison. When you have small amounts of poison, it's good. It's wholesome, but when you have a lot of poison, it will kill. It's like fire, which can kill if there's a lot of it. And you need cross-cultural communication skills to manage them. But I work with many business schools, and I don't see any strong focus on managing multicultural groups. You don't have courses like this. You just have one cross-cultural management, and it's like 15 hours, and that's it. And the final one, that will be it, that's quick self-education and short-term adaptation and a project and role environment. Valeria mentioned that. Now, as we work, we will move from one profession to another during our career. It means that we will be novices for a short time in the new area, but we'll definitely need to pick adjacent professions. It will be like projects or role games. And in the next decade, most of the people will be either part of a project that they will be only stay for 5 to 7 years. So you join a project, you start up a business or you run a department, and you focus on it. You spend 7 years on it, and then due to any reason, you move to a different project. But that project will be comprised of a different team of people, different focus, and a different level of intensity. It means that you have to learn really fast. The model of lifelong learning will be extremely prominent, and that will be a barrier for the majority of our population, because we've not been trained to learn. We've not been taught to learn. It's much easier for us to come to a school where they will teach us for 5 years than starting to read books ourselves and starting to learn ourselves. So that's an outsider's view. I'm not an academician, I work with companies, production companies. I see that many of my customers today need these kind of skills. They don't need advanced training in financing and marketing. You've got good books on this, you've got good lectures, but that's something that they're missing. And I think these are the strands that will become more prominent going forward. And that's like I would like to focus your attention on this. I don't claim to have the ultimate truth, but I think these will be most critical in the future. This will be the recipes of success of future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have, in fact, any minute anymore, but perhaps we could next 4 or 5 minutes still give a floor to the public or to panelists. I only think that you are too pessimistic, because I was already 15 years ago at IMD learning about managing multicultural teams, even on remote way, etc. It was a lady with a Polish name who was teaching this. So I think that if I may conclude this session, and perhaps you can, in the break, my colleagues will be available. I really think that that we could all enjoy different perspectives, different knowledge, different experience. I could answer to you, lady, there that on the first row there, you know, that we can be more proud of ourselves because we are having, you know, I think that some of our schools in East and Central Europe are very innovative. If I go to, for instance, if I would like to learn something on sustainability, there is one school in Brazil, you know, and not in Rio de Janeiro, but in this Curitiba is the name of the town, where this guy Norman is, his name is like the #1 in the world in his school, you know. So you can find the opportunities where you can learn also from countries that are outside of UK or USA or whatever. I think, but what is the most important is that we are more bringing together, especially in so-called dynamic societies, or you said dynamic world. What we should bring together more is theory and practice, experiential learning, and, you know, the teams together, and also, of course, in the beginning we were just mimicking and learning from the more developed countries on management education, but I see now the schools that are innovating, using, you know, really based more on inspiration, etc. And of course, you can say, you know, we should help to the poorer world, etc. But I think that our, of course, and we should educate not only managers, everybody is saying that, but all the people better educated, that would help a lot, you know. I agree with that, certainly, but I think that there should be another motivation for us, why to be, you know, a good management school, then, you know, or why to make it online or whatever, you know, then because we are poorer, right? This argument, doesn't work for me. I want to be the first and the best and in something, you know. You can't be good in everything. But I already yesterday mentioned Russia has such a great cultural past, I mean, and the presence, but you don't use that. Russia has, I don't know how many other resources, like science, you know. I don't know for the courses, but perhaps I'm an ignorant. The courses where science would be used more in management education, you know, managing of science. You know, you have all these high-tech companies, etc., or management of technology, etc. So I think that each of us should discover where we are good in and then bring the best resources from all over the world and make something good and special, you know. If CEEMAN, the association that I lead, made something good for this part of the world, then I think that we were really, we are trying to help with creating bigger self-awareness and self-pride, you know. Because this should be a driver, you know, to do something on our positive experience. I thank you very much. I have to say that I learned a lot from each of you and from all of you, and I look forward to come to the next Gaidar Forum, because this is one of the best things that one can find in this part of the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.